It was the eve of Issus, when a lone shepherd paused on a rocky slope above the river. The moon had just crested the horizon, silvering the fields below. He watched in silence as a single figure strode along the north bank, cloak billowing, eyes set on the distant fires of the Persian camp. Even from this distance, the shepherd felt a shiver, an energy like thunder gathering before a storm. No ordinary man could move with such purpose, nor inspire such quiet awe in glinting steel, in horses like shadows. He heard whispers among his flock. He is the son of gods. He wears the sun in his smile. And in that moment, the shepherd understood that this man sought not just victory or wealth, but something far greater, a kind of immortality that no tomb could hold. This man was Alexander of Macedon, barely 30 years old, yet already the architect of an empire that stretched from the Aegean to the Indus. His life was measured not in some tally of years, but in deeds so vast they defied the boundary between mortal and legend. As he crept beneath those moonlit skies, the soldiers who had slept under the weight of fear felt their hearts stir. They sensed in his presence the tremor of destiny. In the flicker of those distant campfires, Alexander saw not a sleeping army, but a world waiting to be remade, waiting for a spark that could ignite the ambitions of millions. And so he gathered his talismanic resolve and prepared to cross a river that separated him from history itself. Even as a child, Alexander exhibited a gaze that pierced beyond the horizon. Aristotle, his tutor, once marveled at how the young prince would climb the hills around Pella and stare into the distance, as though searching for an answer no one else could see. In those silent moments, the seed of immortality was planted. Alexander did not merely inherit a kingdom, he inherited a vision of boundless possibility. When he was 12, he tamed Bucephalus, a horse no other would dare ride. As the colt shied and bucked, young Alexander recognized that the animal feared its own shadow. With a steady voice, he turned Bucephalus toward the sun so that his shadow fell behind him, and the horse calmed. As he mounted, Aristotle remarked, "Remember, my son, that an empire is conquered not by brute force alone, but by understanding fear, both in men and in one's own heart." In this act, Alexander revealed a truth. To become immortal through your deeds, you must see beyond fear's illusions. He recognized that the greatest obstacles are often projections of doubt, and he chose to face them head-on. In your own life, the shadow may be uncertainty about your purpose, hesitation to pursue a dream, or social pressures that whisper you cannot succeed. Alexander's patience with Bucephalus teaches us that when you confront your fears, giving them space, understanding their shape, you can mount them and ride, rather than be held prisoner. Each time you defeat a personal fear, you carve a notch in the stone of your legacy. When Alexander ascended the throne at 20, many expected him to remain a figurehead, overshadowed by his regents and generals. But he moved swiftly to consolidate power, not through cruelty, but through decisive action and a resolute mind. In the winter after his father's death, when the Macedonian courtiers debated whether Alexander was fit to lead, he strode into the Senate chamber. He wore no crown. His tunic was simple, his hair disheveled by grief and wind. Yet when he spoke, his voice rang with conviction. "If you seek a leader who hesitates, look elsewhere. I shall not falter. I shall not delay." The courtiers, expecting a timid youth, saw instead a man whose purpose set his very bones ablaze. With that statement, he forged his own resolve into a blade that could cleave through doubt. Self-mastery was the anvil upon which his legacy was hammered. In every choosing moment, when he decided to push beyond comfort, to remain true to his course despite obstacles, He laid another brick in the monument of his deeds. Alexander tested himself relentlessly. He held war councils into the night, sparring in the training grounds through blizzards, fasting before battles to sharpen his mind. Such acts of self-discipline told his soldiers, "I expect of myself what I ask of you." By demanding excellence from himself, he forced the world to acknowledge his authority. If you seek immortality through action, note this: the campaigns of your life, your profession, your relationships, your creative endeavors, will only leave a lasting imprint if you are willing to push your limits. It is not enough to plan. You must act, even when that action tests your endurance. When you rise before dawn to hone your craft, when you face rejection without cowering, when you chart a course others deem impossible, you begin to carve your name into the fabric of time. As Alexander marched through the Peloponnesian landscape, he knew that victory was not guaranteed by valor alone. He needed the loyalty of his men, an army that saw him not as an aloof monarch, but as a brother in arms. On the eve of Chaeronea, he slept not in a heater's lodge, but beside his foot soldiers, sharing their blankets and their peril. When dawn broke and battle lines formed, he mounted his stallion and rode among them, looking into every face, speaking to their hearts. He understood that respect cannot be decreed, but must be cultivated. He listened to his general's counsel, yet he refused to remain distant. He rewarded courage on the field, ricocheting praise when a grenadier held his line, ensuring a promotion for a cavalry officer who refused to retreat. In the heat of battle, he never flinched. Instead, he repositioned himself so that his men could see his fortitude, drawing strength from his presence. Respect, he seemed to teach, is also the product of shared hardship and mutual trust. In your own world, consider how you build loyalty. Do you share hardships with your team? Do you extend credit to those who shine, or do you claim the glory alone? When you recognize the contributions of others, you create a bond stronger than fear, one founded on mutual respect. Such bonds survive your own departure, carrying your legacy forward in the hearts and stories of those you led. As Alexander prepared to cross the Hellespont into Asia Minor, he carved his name into legend with a single brutal gesture. He had his ship's rowers drag their trireme through a narrow channel no map deemed navigable. As dawn broke, they moored on the eastern shore. When they stepped onto the sands, he cast his spear into the land, proclaiming, "There, let this stand as proof that I have forced my way across." That act was not mere theater. It was the explosion of a will so unbending that even the gods themselves seemed to pause in awe. The men around him, witnessing this, felt a transformation. Their own wills, once frail with fear, found a new anchor in his example. In that moment, they accepted that if Alexander believed he could reshape the world, then they could shoulder his vision without question. In your life, forging an unbreakable will means establishing a purpose that reverberates in every fiber of your being. It is not enough to voice a goal. You must internalize it so completely that doubt becomes unspeakable. If you wish to excel as an artist, refuse to consider the notion of failure. If you wish to build a business, imagine every no as evidence that you are refining your aim. When your will ripples through your posture, your gaze, your very heartbeat, others sense it as inevitability, and respect follows. At the banks of the Hydaspes River in India, Alexander faced a foe unlike any before. Elephants whose size dwarfed cavalry horses, whose charge could shatter both rank and spirit. The battle stretched into an azure dusk, punctuated by the trumpeting of pachyderms. But Alexander refused to bow to these colossal beasts. He observed their movements, studied their patterns, and rallied his phalanx into a tight wedge, creating a corridor through which his companion cavalry could strike at weaknesses. The assault was brutal, the cost high. Yet by dawn, he had secured victory. The story spread through Asia, Europe, and beyond. A man who dared to match wits with nature's most terrifying creations. He showed that no force, embodied in flesh or steel or myth, could stand against a mindset on conquest. In your own life, forging a legacy that defies time means confronting obstacles deemed impossible. When you undertake an endeavor so audacious that it shakes the assumptions of your peers, launching a revolutionary invention, scaling a mountain once thought forbidden, or speaking a truth so deep it fractures comfortable illusions, you carve a niche in history. Your deed outlives you, becoming a beacon for those who follow. Soon, Alexander reached the borders of the known world, where his men, exhausted by decades of marching and battle, urged him to turn back. They reminded him of grief weeping for home, of wives and children yearning for their husbands and fathers. Yet he fixed his gaze eastward, to the place where sky met mystery. He did not speak of impossibility. He spoke only of destiny. I will not return unless I am remembered. But fate intervened. On the banks of the Hephaestus, his men staged a mutiny, refusing to cross farther. In that moment, Alexander faced a choice: force obedience, risk fracturing his empire, or accept their will. He chose peace. He knelt by the river, eyes heavy with the weight of both triumph and sorrow. In his yielding, he showed that wisdom sometimes lies not in relentless pushing, but in knowing when to pause. Yet even as his mortal flame flickered out in Babylon, his deeds continued to blaze across time. He seemed to understand an eternal truth. It is not death one fears, but being forgotten. His campaigns, his strategies, his acts of bold compassion, such as the moment he knelt before a captured Persian priest and granted him mercy, became woven into an epic tapestry, preserved in the memories and legends of countless peoples. Alexander knew that even destruction, wielded with fierce purpose, could be immortal if it carried meaning beyond its violence. Your life is not a footnote unless you allow it to be. The path to immortality begins with a vision. See a horizon beyond your fears, and continues with presence that merges empathy with authority. It demands decisive action, even when the ground trembles, intellectual mastery so thorough that uncertainty quails before you, and relentless discipline that outlasts comfort. It requires elevating others, wielding authority with empathy, embracing change so you never become predictable, and shaping your legacy around values that transcend your lifespan. Each step you take, each fear you conquer, each mind you inspire, each barrier you shatter, becomes a brick in the monument of your deeds. When you weave these elements together, you forge a legacy that outlives your mortal years, an echo that resonates in the minds of those who follow. A life measured not by the tick of a clock, but by the ripples you cast across the shores of time. So step forward now. Seize the mantle of your own destiny. Stand at your metaphorical river's edge and force your way across. Peer into that horizon, whatever your hydasps may be, and remember that true immortality comes not from defying death, but from transcending it through the greatness of your deeds.